All right. Good morning, everyone. It's probably a good thing you don't know about Portuguese soap operas, by the way. It's bad. Okay, we're going to talk about how to foster a culture of discovery and why this is so important. Please raise your hand if you've ever been part of developing a product that has failed to deliver on expectations. Now look around. Okay, keep your hands up, sorry. Look around. Most of us, well, you're not alone, my friends. Most products fail. And that is the tragic reality of our industry, even though we are a bunch of smart people. 6 out of 10 ideas lose money. Only 4 out of 1,000 ideas present extraordinary results, extraordinary return on investment. Why is it? Why is that? I'm going to tell a little story. So this is a story about Bob. So Bob is a leader. Bob is a product leader, works in a large organization. It's a true story, by the way, so pay attention. And so Bob, at some point last year, he started to say stuff like, we need to be strategic. We need to align. And of course, we need to go off-site, as we do. And so Bob went off-site with a few leaders, and they came back with a beautiful roadmap of features. A lot of bunch of stuff to do, things to build, dates. There was even like a Gantt chart, which was the icing on the cake. And they were doing OKRs, of course, or at least they thought they were doing OKRs. And so Bob came back and assigned one of his teams an objective. And the objective was build feature A by the end of the quarter. So team got that objective. They get a feature request, which was something that one of the executives wanted to build. Very little context around why they wanted to build that. The poor product manager had to write some fancy requirements using a template that the company was following. She had to write a business case projecting revenue for the next 5 years. She had no clue what the revenue would be in the next quarter. She hands it over to design, who did some UI and a tiny bit of usability validation. And then they hand it over to the engineers, who are literally looking at the product they are going to build for the first time in sprint planning. But they don't care, because they're not even part of the team. They don't know about it. So they set up a deadline and a launch date, and off they go to work. All right, so a few weeks go by, a month goes by, and look, they actually built the thing. They actually launched it on time, but something else happened. After a few weeks, after launch, no one was buying the product. Very little people was buying the product. So they met their objective, but they fail. And I was lucky enough to observe from the side this story, because I was mentoring this product manager in this story. And she was telling me the story, and she goes, it's a shit show. No one bought the feature he told us to build. So he asked us to build another one, of course. And the cycle continues. And I wonder why. Why do most products fail? Okay, so most products fail because we build stuff that people don't want, or they might want it, but they're not willing to pay for it, which is different. Or they want the product, they're willing to pay for it, but the whole thing is not part of a sustainably profitable business model. And so they're going to fail medium, long term anyway. And these are the risks we can address when we do discovery properly. These are precisely the things we do. We de-risk these things when we have a strong culture of discovery. And so a weak discovery culture is frequently the reason why most products fail. I was talking with the CEO of a medium-sized company the other day, and he goes, if only we had a great idea, then we can place a big bet, and we've been flat for 5 years, we could have a great idea and win the market. And I told him, look, it's not about having great ideas. I wish it was. It's not about having great ideas. It's about having a process and the culture for trying lots of ideas. That's all we need. And so I'm going to give you 7 tips to foster a great culture of discovery in your organizations, hopefully dramatically increasing the likelihood of success. So pressure is on. But before, let me tell you what I think great looks like. So to me, we have a great culture of discovery when we are discovering solutions to solve problems collaboratively, so we're doing that as a team, making evidence-based decisions that will drive business results. And we're doing that sooner. And this is important, because I've seen teams fail and companies fail because they don't do discovery. I've seen teams fail because they do it wrong, and I've seen teams fail because they only do discovery. They spend 6 months trying to understand the problem we're trying to solve, and then they spend 6 more months validating if that's actually a problem that we want to solve. And then it's been a year and we haven't shipped any value, we haven't learned. And the thing is, problem space and solution space, they're not separated, they are intertwined. The more we test solutions, the more we know about the problem. All right, let's dive in. What are the 7 things? First thing is actually the starting point. Empower product teams to solve problems, not to implement features, not to implement things. This is the starting point. When we have a problem to solve, that enables discovery. Because we're going to together discover a solution to solve that problem. Now, when the starting point is a feature to build, there's nothing to discover. We're going to do some validation at most, which is different. And so, there's a lot of pieces that need to be in place for us to get into this point, and that could be a whole talk. One of the pieces, of course, something that Marta just talked about, product strategy. That could be a whole talk. So I'm not going to go into that. But what I'm going to talk about is, if you are given a thing to build, what can you do? What can you do if you're given a roadmap of things? What can you do so that your starting point is actually a problem to solve? Okay. First thing is start small and meet people where they are. I can't tell you how many times I've heard frustrated designers and product managers because the way they work in their organizations is radically different from what they read in the books that come from mostly Silicon Valley. And then they get frustrated because, Jesus, we don't work in this way. And they come back to their companies and they want a revolution. They want Bob to change his beliefs in a day. Bad news, it's not going to work, unfortunately. And so we need to meet Bob where he is. Bob the leader, right? So you have a feature request, you have a thing you want to do, reverse engineer that to the outcomes you want to achieve. Think about the problems you want to solve, think about the customer and business outcomes you want to achieve. And then take those outcomes as your starting point, and together with the team, try to find other solutions. Together with the team, with the engineers, everyone, find other solutions, including the feature that Bob wants. Because look, it can be a good idea. Just don't ditch it immediately just because he's a leader. And so do this and then get out of the building 1 day or 2, get some evidence, test some of these solutions, and tell a story that meets Bob where he is. Tell a story that he wants to hear and have that conversation. If you do that, you are 1 step closer to having a problem as the starting point, which is what we want. But when we have ideas, when we have solutions, when we're testing those solutions, really what we want to do is, which is principle number 2, be obsessed with mapping out your assumptions. And I was thinking about this last night. I highlighted the word assumptions. I should actually have highlighted the word obsessed, because it really is about having an obsession. Every time we're conceptualizing something different, every time we are having another idea, we need to be obsessed about mapping those assumptions. I was talking with a founder of an early stage startup a few months ago, and he was a very charismatic guy, and he was pitching to me his idea. And it was a great story, but it was very easy to understand that behind that great story, there's just a bunch of guesses. He was making assumptions that a certain customer segment wants a certain value proposition. He was making assumptions that that customer segment is willing to pay a certain price for his product. He was making assumptions that he has the right channels to deliver that value. He was making assumptions that he has the right partners who he actually needed for this, in this particular case. Just a bunch of guesses, and this is the important thing, and the funny part. He was not aware of most of those assumptions because he didn't go through the exercise of mapping them out. And so this is really important. We need to map our assumptions to make them visible, to make them clear, and also to improve our thinking. What we're seeing here is the business model canvas But I do want to emphasize, it doesn't matter what canvas you use. There's other canvases out there, the lean canvas and other canvas. As far as I know, you can have your own canvas. The point here is to really go through the activity together with the team to map out the assumptions around the whole business model, not just the value proposition. So we want to ensure that we are creating value, we are delivering value, and we're capturing value. Because what we want to do next is to test those assumptions collaboratively and continuously. Ditch the handovers. It doesn't work. Building products is a team sport. And I think a lot of people understand this, and most of you have probably heard about the product trio concept. But I really feel that as an industry, you don't really understand sometimes why it's so important that we discover solutions together. And this is why. When we are discovering a solution, our job is to ensure that we're building something that people want, that is desirable, that they can figure out how to use, that works for your business, so your sales team can actually sell the thing you're building, the marketing team can market it, that it's compliant, very important, and that you can build it. You can build the thing. Not just the product, but the whole business model. You can build the product, but you can also deliver it and capture the value. And the reason why we need to do this together is because each discipline is particularly better equipped to address some of these risks. So designers are better equipped to address the usability and desirability risk, and product managers are usually better equipped to address viability and also desirability risks, and a tech lead or a senior engineer, feasibility. So this is reason number one, we need to do this together. We're stronger together, basically. Reason number two is because these risks are intertwined. You can't outsource to a designer to test desirability and usability and then viability to a product manager. It doesn't work. Because they're intertwined risks. So for example, if you, for example, are designing a value proposition to me, imagine that you've done the jobs to be done and you know, the pains, and you understand my problem. And you've designed something that I love, job done. Now, as soon as you add a price to it, I'm not going to pay for this. I'm not willing to pay for it. So at this point, you have a product that I love, but you have a terrible business idea because I'm not going to buy it. So it's not viable. So these things go really hand in hand. And this is so important because, you know, our job in our industry, I at least strongly believe that it's not enough to build products that customers love. It's just not enough. We need to focus on building profitable businesses. We are not running a design atelier. We're not running a non-profit research and development department. Most of us are running businesses. And so it's extremely important that we focus not only on customer value, but business value as well. As Steve Johnson, VP of Design at Netflix, puts it, design without business is just decoration. All right, so what can we do to foster a culture where our teams, everyone, is thinking about customer value and business value? What can we actually do? Well, one thing we can do is to change the accountability model. Make teams, not the product manager or someone else, make teams accountable for product outcomes that enable business outcomes. Most companies out there, the Bobs of this world, the founders, they are accountable for the business results. And that impacts what the team does, basically. Because what we're accountable for impacts what you do. Simply put, if a team, which this is the case most of the times, if a team is accountable for building stuff on time, they're going to have a certain tasks, certain conversations, certain habits that are related to that accountability. Now, when we change the accountability model for teams to be accountable for the results of what they're building, they just become super curious about the customer and about ways to move the business forward because they're accountable for it. They don't want to waste their time. And so something that really happens when you change the accountability is that people become more curious, they become closer to customers, and they just start talking with customers so much more often, which is already a great starting point. But unfortunately, it's not enough. It's not enough that we just talk with customers. we need to strengthen our evidence from what customers say they'll do to what customers actually do. And this is huge. This is probably one of the most painful lessons I've learned in my product journey. I just relied way too much on what customers say. Damn it. We've all heard stuff like this. Oh, I love this idea. Oh, I'm definitely gonna buy it. Oh, I'm definitely gonna use this every day. Except they don't when it's out. We get lost with say land. We get lost with compliments. We get distracted with compliments about our concepts, about our ideas, about what we want to build. And part of the reason why is because we suffer from confirmation bias, all of us. We love the idea, maybe, that we have, and so we're going to seek those compliments. But also because, customers or humans, we are overly optimistic about the future. And so when people say that they're going to buy it, they're not necessarily lying with bad intentions, but it's just very optimistic. And so through our discovery, we need to design experiments that help us bridge this gap. This is known as the say-do gap. And it's so important. We need to get commitments on the table, like financial commitments from customers, like letters of intent, actually paying for an MVP. We need to get reputation commitments. People, especially in B2B, very important, people standing by your product when it's out with a statement and stuff like that. We want those commitments, because that's so much stronger evidence. So when we have an idea, we really want to test the most important assumptions together with very low fidelity experiments. We want to run interviews and all the stuff you know about. So we want to do that. And then we want to kill those ideas very fast if they're not good. And as they show potential, we want to evolve the fidelity of our experiments to bridge the gap between what customers say they'll do to what customers actually do. It's very important that we design this series of experiments to get higher confidence levels with stronger evidence. And as a result of that, decrease the risk of our ideas. So if you go in a room and if you go in a room with a product team and you hear an engineer asking, okay, so how confident are we that customers are actually going to buy this? Or you hear a designer saying, what evidence do we have that people will actually use this? These are great conversations. This means that you probably have a culture where people are making evidence-based decisions. They're thinking about evidence. It's amazing. It really is. It's very powerful. Because it's just the first step, avoiding building something that people don't want. So having those conversations is very valuable. But measuring that evidence using a framework that works for you and your team is even more powerful. I found this to be incredibly powerful in a lot of teams. When you have a simple framework that works for you, that you use to measure the evidence you're generating, that just takes the conversations to a whole new level, and you also become very aware of the time you're spending, which is something that Rami mentioned yesterday in his great talk. So I like to use a very simple framework. Some of you might be familiar with it. And look, again, there's other frameworks. The framework itself will never replace good thinking, but it helps us. This is helpful. You have a very simple framework where you're measuring the confidence, the evidence from what people say to what people do. So for example, if you run interviews, that's level 1. That's very light evidence. I wouldn't trust someone saying, oh, I will definitely buy it. It's a good statement. It's probably a good leading indicator that there's something there. But I would, if it's an idea that carries a lot of risk, because of course this is related to the risk of what you're building, I would be much more confident if that person has signed a letter of intent, for example. All right, so those are the 7 things, but I do have a last takeaway, which is, I didn't know how to describe it, but it's basically a culmination of my experiences applying some of these principles in either the organizations that I work in, trying to, or through the people that I help on the side. And it is a little bit of an annoying takeaway, at least it is for me. The fact that every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. This is so profound. A bad system will beat every time a good team. Every single time. No chance. And so, this is so important for product leaders to understand, for company leaders. Just to get a sense of the room, can you please raise your hand if you're a product leader or a company leader? Okay, quite a few actually. Amazing. Probably like, I don't know, 20%, 15. So this is particularly helpful for you. You need to understand that you can have the best product team in the world, the most talented designer. If that team is part of an environment that is dysfunctional, they're not set up for succeeding. And so we need to understand that these teams are part of larger systems that incentivize and constrain certain behaviors. So what can we do? Well, something I want you to reflect on is think about the habits that you want to foster in your team. Think about the habits you want to foster in your companies that you believe will actually help you create better products and be happier as a team. Think about those habits and then think about the incentives you have today that incentivize you doing those behaviors, and also think about the constraints you have in your team, in your company, the barriers that might be hindering you from those behaviors. And the reason why I said that this is particularly important for leaders is because your role and your background makes you better equipped to address some of these risks. Thank you so much.